Hi, Dr. Carolyn here with my special guest, and we're going to be having a really interesting conversation with Donna Torrisi. Donna is a nurse practitioner and founder of a community health center in Philadelphia, which grew to 5 sites. Her first book is about her experience of working with low-income patients who she found courageous and resilient. She is the recipient of numerous leadership awards for her work in this field, and she's also a 2005 graduate of the Robert Wood Johnson Executive Nurse Fellowship Program. She served on the Governor's Commission for Chronic Care Management and the Governor's Advisory Committee on Healthcare Reform, and she is a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing. Now, here's where the kicker comes in. All of her experience in medicine, as a nurse practitioner, and so on, has led to the upcoming publication of her second book called Tattoo Monologues: Indelible Marks on the Body and Soul. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So it is kind of curious that, looks like you had pretty much a standard nurse practitioner arc for your career, and then out of the blue comes this tattoo book. What led to the publication or what led to your interest?
Right, sure. I went radical on myself. So, though I was leading a fairly large network of community health centers, I always had a small clinical practice, and that was part of our culture, is that all leaders had a small clinical practice, even if they were, the dental director or whatever. So I think it actually, my interest got perked in tattoos when my son was 17 years old and he was sleeping on the couch and his shoulder was showing, and I saw a tattoo and I nearly freaked out. And he was very intrigued with tattoos, and I had to either lose him or join him. And I decided I would join him. So I became intrigued with tattoos. So I started noticing them on my patients. And I started asking them about their tattoos. And I was so intrigued. I said to myself, someday I'm going to write a book about women and tattoos. I'm going to do that when I retire. And sometimes
I have to ask you, do you have a tattoo yourself?
I figured you were going to ask me that question. I actually do, and it hurt like hell, and I can't believe that people do this over and over.
I know.
But I do have a tattoo on my right ankle.
And I have a tattoo on my left ankle.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I do.
Well, we can share what our tattoos are all about.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like, though, it was more than just asking people about, like, how did you get a tattoo or why, but that you made some kind of connection between the patient's trauma or pain in their life or certain life events and why they got the tattoo. Is that true?
Yes. I can tell you how it proceeded from there, if you want to hear that now.
Sure.
So I decided I'm not going to wait till I retire. That's ridiculous. I'm going to start doing this now. So I found a photographer who was very interested in joining me for the project. His name is Kenny Kaufman. And what he would do is videotape the interviews and then take stills of the women and their tattoos. So after I interviewed a few women, we sat with a friend of ours who was actually a licensed clinical social worker, therapist, and we're talking about our experience in that the first 2 people, or first 3 or 4 maybe, had a tattoos having to do with some kind of a difficult life experience. Mm-hmm. And she really helped steer me in the direction of really sticking with that issue, not just women and tattoos, but tattoos that really told the story of some kind of a life difficulty or trauma.
So can you give some examples of that?
Sure. I have women from all walks of life. I have a woman who was a severe alcoholic and had her children taken from her and had her 4 children tattooed on her body.
Okay.
I have another woman who was working as a volunteer in a animal shelter. And when she went to feed a pit bull, it grabbed her arm and nearly took part of her arm off. And she ended up with a tattoo with the paw prints of the dog that she had, and told the story about how depressed she was and that she had PTSD, and that she had rescued this little Chihuahua that she had named Elf, and now it was rescuing her because she had to get out of bed to take him for walks.
Awesome.
So she had his paw print, and she had a poem on her arm. That was really lovely.
Yeah. Wow. So, almost everybody has a tattoo now, even us older women. And they don't seem to be as frowned upon, although, I can say even within my own family, one of my sons is very pro tattoo, the younger one, and then one is very against tattoos. And so it doesn't seem like everybody is on board, but do you feel that the majority of tattoos have some meaning? Or because I'm thinking about my younger son who, like you, I got interested in tattoos when he got his first tattoo right around the same age as your son. But his tattoo definitely had a meaning, and it had a connection to some trauma, as does my tattoo. However, subsequently, he's had probably 4 or 5 other tattoos, which he says have no meaning, and he doesn't intend to get any other tattoos that have meaning. So what is your take on, whether the tattoos are just decorative or mostly have meaning? And is it different for men versus women?
I think the answer to your first question is it's really mixed. I had a patient in my office yesterday who, was disrobed because I was doing an exam on her, and I asked her about her tattoos. She said she had 15 of them, and some of them, she said, were just pretty, and some of them had a story. So I think it's really mixed.
Okay.
Women. I don't know so much about men. Probably the answer would be the same. But at least, and I haven't done a book on men, and so I haven't really gotten into it deeply. But I certainly have seen men, especially in our community that is primarily African American, of rest in peace tattoos on their arms having to do with a lost friend or family member to violence.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So what else have you learned, though, about talking to your patients about tattoos?
Well, I've been very intrigued with what is it about a tattoo that would help a person come to grips with or heal from trauma. First of all, they have to be conscious of the trauma. As you probably know, there are some traumas that we don't allow to surface into our consciousness because we just can't manage it at that point in our life, and we would be too flooded emotionally. So first, it has to be in one's consciousness. Right. And it can become in one's consciousness when we're ready to manage it, or sometimes something triggers a memory. So anyway, the question I've often asked myself and asked women is, why a tattoo? Let's say it's in memory of someone who died. Why not wear a piece of their jewelry or own some object that they owned? And I get different answers. Some people have told me that something material can be taken away from them, but the tattoo can never take them because no one can take my skin. I've had other people who have had sexual abuse, and the symbol of their tattoo is almost a telling of their story. Hey, here I am, look at me, this is what happened to me. And, as you know, we heal from traumas often by talking about them in the presence of a healing or in the presence of a compassionate individual.
Yeah. So what is it, though, about a tattoo that gives it some kind of healing power?
I'm not sure I totally have the answer to that, but I think it's the combination of those things of it's always with me. I can see it. I felt it. When someone gets a tattoo, they put an incredible investment in time, in money, in space on their body, and in physical discomfort. Mm-hmm. So one has to be really serious about it to make that decision.
But it's interesting because trauma experts like Bessel van der Kolk talk about the body keeps the score, that trauma stays in our body even decades after it's happened. Could the tattoo almost be a kind of a metaphor for that, or a visual representation of the trauma that lives in our bodies?
Yes, Carolyn, it certainly can. I have had some women tell me that there's something about the physical pain and getting a tattoo that in and of itself has some kind of healing properties.
Hmm.
And I'm curious about it. The only thing that I can think of akin to that is cutting. And we know that that is a phenomenon sometimes in people who've had, trauma. But I'm not sure I totally have the answer to that. I have another woman who had been the victim of sexual abuse. This is a really interesting story. And she had repressed the memory. She had been molested as a very young child in a basement of her home by a neighbor. And she had repressed it until she was an adult and got an apartment in a basement. And then those emotions came flooding back to her.
Wow.
And the perpetrator's last name was Wolf.
Hmm.
And she had a Pacific Northwest wolf tattooed on her arm.
Wow.
And that was her way of taking back the name by having that symbol on her body. I'm not sure I understand totally about that, but we do understand that people want to take back things that have been hurtful to them. I hate to use this as an example, but it's one of the things I think of is in the African-American culture, the N-word is something we don't want to hear, but it's used in African-American music.
Rap music and,
Yes.
rap music and all of that.
And it's
And there's a huge argument about that between Jay-Z and Oprah about it, the taking back of the N-word versus perpetuating the stigma of the N-word. And I think there's a lot of precedent on both sides to that argument, but it's an interesting one. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So what is one of the most unusual tattoos and stories that you remember hearing from clients? Something else that's, really stuck in your mind?
I'm not sure this is one of the most unusual, but certainly is one of the most profound. There was a woman working, and we had a large business office, and the woman who was my assistant and her younger daughter, who was a college student, also worked in our office. And the college student, her name was Jaquia, was killed tragically in a car accident, which was incredibly traumatic for their family, but also all of our staff.
Yeah.
And tattoos were not in her definition of herself. This is the mother.
Right.
She absolutely, that was not who she was, and had no intention until she had this tremendous loss. And she also had twin severely disabled sons who her daughter helped her care for. And she would say, "My daughter always had my back." And so on her back is the name of her daughter, Jaquia, with angel wings.
Oh, how beautiful.
That was one of the more touching stories. The other woman who was actually in the accident with her, who survived, had a tattoo. She had already had several tattoos. And the story she told me is, my mother never saw my tattoos till I was in the hospital. But she had the tattoo on her back that's called Footprints, which you might be familiar with.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the exact words, but this is when I didn't see your footprints when the Lord was carrying me. And she had that down her spine because she believed that she learned to walk again and to recover because of her strong spiritual beliefs.
Wow, such amazing stories, right, related to tattoos. So tell us about the story related to your tattoo.
I wish I had a very profound story, but I really don't. It's actually more about my childhood. And it does mean something to me, but it's not about a trauma. I have Tinkerbell on my ankle. Tinkerbell to me was first of all, I wanted to be Peter Pan when I was a child. And Tinkerbell was willing to give up her life to save her good buddy, Peter Pan. And so for me, it's a real symbol of love and compassion and friendship and loyalty.
Oh, that's beautiful. But what made you decide to actually go through it and get the tattoo?
You know what? I really think it was around, I have two children. One of them is a biological child, and my son is adopted. And sometimes the ties between a parent and adopted child are strained or tenuous. And I think I tried so hard to want to be a part of his life. And I really think it was the joining him and his intrigue and his love of tattoos that really led me to get one. And actually, he came with me when I got it.
Oh, now you say this is your son who was adopted, and is there a story also with tattoos regarding his birth mother?
Yes, actually, there is. First, in full disclosure, we absolutely supported him at age 19 when he asked us to help us find his birth parents. And we hired someone to help us find her, and we found her very quickly. And then began their phone conversations. And I'm not going to say that I wasn't a little bit jealous. I was. But their relationship grew over the years. We brought her out here from Kentucky to spend time with us. When they first met for a few days, we put her up in a hotel. And since he's become friends, very close to his three half sisters. Anyway, to make a long story short, he and his birth mother have a tattoo in common. And yes, that makes me jealous, but I'm not going to get another tattoo.
What is their tattoo? Can you share that?
It's a Celtic symbol, and it's a Celtic symbol, I think, of bonding and loyalty.
Okay.
And they spent a lot of time going back and forth about, tattoos that were too masculine or too feminine until they came up with this. And, I wasn't a real part of that conversation or that happening. I was really left out of that until, it happened. And I asked about it.
That must have been a little hard, though.
Yeah, it was hard. Yeah. He had a very big private life around his, bonding with his birth family.
Yeah. Did that story influence your thinking about body art in any way?
I think what it did was sort of deepen my understanding of the profound, if the word is right, profoundness of tattoos for men and women. And there's something about giving up a place on your skin that is there forever. And I think the foreverness is a really huge part of this. And the being a part of one's body that one cannot separate from or take away, that has very, very deep meaning.
Yeah. But it seems like the younger generation is becoming increasingly tattooed. People are getting whole sleeves and, the side of their flank and all of that. And it doesn't always seem to have a meaning, but is there a meaning in society, like culturally, that you have uncovered that's explains why so many young people are getting tattooed?
That's an interesting question. We've really seen our culture think about tattoos, make a real shift from thinking of tattoos with drunken sailors, prison inmates, gangs, even associated with the Holocaust. And some cultures and religions are really very much against marking the body. In fact, I couldn't quote what passage it is in the Bible, but there is a passage in the Bible about not marking one's body. I certainly have seen that change. And for tattoos, particularly if they're done tastefully, have been largely accepted by society. I think we still might see cringing and difficulty with tattoos on the face, the neck, the hands, and the sleeves. That's, taking it to another level. I have no judgment about that, but I suspect that there is a lot of judgment on that in our society.
Have you had any patients who've had neck or facial tattoos or tattoos in places that could never be covered up?
Oh, absolutely.
Are their stories any different?
I have a very interesting story to tell you.
Good.
This is about a very dear patient of mine. In fact, I just saw her yesterday, who had I'm sorry, this is about a coworker of mine who lost her sister at age 23 to a seafood allergy. She had an anaphylactic reaction and died. And my patient, whose name is Kim, went to her tattoo artist, and actually that tattoo artist is interviewed in my book. She went to him and said, put a teardrop on my face. And he refused to do it.
Why?
He said, it's going to get in the way of your future career. People are going to judge you for it. And I really urge you to not make that decision now. This guy has also told me stories about young people coming in and asking for tattoos in very visible areas, and him not being unwilling to do that because of their decisions. He said, making a buck is not as important as, following my ethics around this.
Yeah. Did he have any further insight about why people get tattoos or what the meanings are?
I can tell you that in our interview, he talked about, and again, he was referring to women calling him and telling him, I have to come see you soon. I need my therapy.
Oh.
So, yeah. So I need my therapy. I mean, really, what does that mean? What is it about getting a tattoo that is therapeutic? I mean, it's some of the things we've talked about, but I don't know that I'll truly ever really understand the therapeutic value of a tattoo.
Well, of getting the tattoo, because for me, it was so painful. I can't even imagine getting another tattoo. But, I've had patients who've had, I have one in particular who had probably the most beautiful tattoos I've ever seen. It was like a whole work of art that covered her entire back and then one sleeve of her arm. And it was done in different stages. So I saw it, from when it was relatively small to when it was almost complete. And it was unbelievably beautiful. And for her, it was all about, it was more of a spiritual connection that she had to Buddhism and how that had changed her life and so on and so forth. But it was a massive work of art. And, for her, I've heard people say, just as you have, that the pain is therapeutic. For me, it wasn't. I barely made it through my first tattoo without bolting because of the pain. But I know for some people it is. And I have a friend who's a trauma therapist who says that she views the tattoos as almost like self-harm, like you said, cutting. So that's another viewpoint that, is out there about it too. So has talking about this or learning about this changed you in any way?
Yes, I would say, how could it not? I mean, I spent hours interviewing 29 women who, by the way, were very eager to tell their stories. And also, I had no problem finding women to tell their stories. In fact, I finally had to put an end to the book, and then I kept meeting people I wish I could have put in the book. Yeah, I mean, it educated me. I certainly was aware of the issue of trauma in the population that we care for, because it's a very traumatized population of people, male and female. But I had no inkling at all about tattoos representing traumas. So it's changed me a lot and made me much more intrigued with asking. And I think it's really deepened my relationship with my patients to be asking the questions and hearing about what they've experienced in their lives. And
so do you recommend that, like within your clinics, do you talk about this subject and recommend that other healthcare providers ask about, it shouldn't be part of the regular history and physical that we do with patients?
I haven't gotten to that point. Certainly my primary care colleagues know about the book and have heard me talk about it. I actually have stopped short of ever asking them to inquire about, because there's so many things we ask them to inquire about, but we do inquire about trauma. I mean, that is a depression and trauma are routine questions that are part of the intake process of all of our patients.
Yeah.
I have another story to tell you. This is another woman in her 80s who also tattoos were not in her vocabulary at all. And in her, I guess it was her, around her 80th birthday, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and subsequently had a double mastectomy. And on the eve of her going into the hospital to have a reconstruction, she canceled her surgery and just felt at her age, she just didn't want to go through that again. She is a very active social activist. And the environment is one of her very heartfelt issues. And so instead of getting a reconstruction of her breast across her chest, she has a design of flowers and birds and bees that tell her story of what the environment means to her and protecting it means to her.
Wow. And is it like a lei that you'd get in Hawaii, or?
More than that, it really pretty much covers her entire chest.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh my goodness. That's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, to make that decision in one's 80s and to experience that kind of physical discomfort and give up that much geography on one's skin, I think is pretty incredible.
Pretty incredible to have the courage to say no to the doctors as well, because that's that's a tough one. When they say you should have this done or else, and she made her own decision. That's hard.
Yeah, she ran a marathon, and at the end of the marathon, she pulled open her shirt and bared her chest.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. Well, it's really been interesting talking with you, Donna, and I hope the listeners have gained some information that might be useful to them, whether they're parents of tattooed teens or they themselves want to get a tattoo. And I think it's, the therapy value is something we haven't really talked about before. And it's very clear that that's the case. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to seeing your book when it comes out.
Okay, I think you said you wanted me to say what our
I was just gonna ask you, how can people find your book or find out more about you?
It is on Barnes and Nobles and on Amazon, and it comes out in October. It can be pre-ordered. And my website is tattoomonologues.com.
Okay, so the name of the book is Tattoo Monologues, Indelible Marks on the Body and Soul. And I will put a link to Donna's website in the show notes. So you should be able to access that there. So thanks again, Donna. It was a pleasure talking with you.